Hello, adventurers, and welcome to the Micflayers podcast. This is my D&D podcast. There are many like it, but this one is mine. My name is Conor Martin, and joining me as always is my co-host, Mr. Martin O'Dwyer. Hey, Martin.
Hey, Connor. Oh my God. I don't know how I didn't pick that one. I don't know how I didn't see that coming. Because, Jesus. Just Jesus. No, that was good. That was good. I like that. I like that a lot, actually.
Thank you. How are you getting on today? How's things?
I'm good. It's been a long week. I went up and down to Dublin, and I had a bunch of other stuff I had to do. But God of War also came out, which we were talking about before we started recording, and it is, dear God, it's amazing, and I've not gotten played enough. So when we finish this, I am probably going to play like 9 hours of God of War. Watch out, my D&D campaign. The story's about to drastically change. Suddenly Draugr everywhere. No, I'm good, man. I'm good. It's been it's a bit of a long week, but had a few points with a friend last night and stuff like that. So I'm doing well, and most importantly, I wasn't working today, so I'm doing fantastic.
Yeah, I had a long week as well, only because I've been on weekends for the past 3 months, and my weekend, the 2 days I work at the weekend are far easier than my midweek days. I have a lot less stuff to do. I can just kind of go in and work on emails and stuff like that. And now I'm back as of this week, Monday to Friday, full 5-week stretch again, which is like, took a readjustment, but sure, look.
Yeah, no, I feel
we're here.
Just back
I'm
on
alive.
the weekends now, so I'm back into like 5 full days in a row again. But I'll gladly suffer for a weekend off.
Yeah, true. Martin.
Yes.
What are we discussing today?
Bang, bang, bang! We're talking about guns.
We're talking about firearms in D&D and whether or not they get a bad rep, or whether or not they fit in the world of D&D, and all that kind of stuff, and mechanically how they work and thematically how they work.
Yes.
So Martin, to start off, do firearms belong in D&D?
Okay, I have like a specific first of all, actually, I'll just be general. Yes, they do. I absolutely agree they do. I think they're very fun, and just like another way to fulfill a specific kind of fantasy. But in terms of how they work, I absolutely believe there should be there. But like in my general idea of fantasy, guns are in there. Like if you just asked me to envision like a generic fantasy world, I would have envisioned some kind of firearm in there. But not necessarily like everyone has one. They're like Tech 9s and like Glocks and stuff. No, like there's probably like maybe like one group of people or organization, or maybe just like a town or a country or somewhere where guns are maybe they're common there, but everywhere else in the world extremely scarce, and like people with the knowledge to make them are probably even scarcer. Although like the materials you may need to make them probably exist in other fashions, like during mining and stuff like that. But yeah, I would like, if you were asked me to envision like traditional D&D, for me there would be guns in there. They just wouldn't be super widespread, and like it'd be another thing where like if a player wanted to play a gunslinger, I'd be like, okay, so do you want to be the guy who invented them, or like you were quite literally the lone gunslinger?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, if again, in a generic sense, if you ask me the question, I'm going to say yeah, absolutely. Realistically, anything can be in your D&D game. Yeah. There are rules in the DMG for like adding laser pistols and all this sort of wacky sci-fi stuff, jetpacks and stuff. So like, yeah, I mean, that's the great thing about D&D is that it is so flexible in that sense.
They literally put a death ray in Fizzbands, like.
In Fizz, or did they?
Yeah. Oh. The Cobalt Disintegrator, I think it's called.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. So like D&D can get wacky. Don't be afraid that your D&D can get wacky. But even with that being said, I don't think putting firearms in is the most outlandish or wacky thing you can do. Firearms have been around a lot longer than people realize. People tend to think of it of the musket kind of era, where it's like colonial times, like the 1700s and stuff like that. But really, like, you go back a few more 100 years, like into the medieval period, there were things like not blunderbuss, but what they're called, arquebus.
Arbalist.
Is it arbalist?
Yeah, there's I think that's the term from there. Like, or they were like very very early firearms. They were like match, and I think they were like match and flint or something like that. Like, is it like
matchlock would have come first. which was the wick
It's,
when you had
yeah,
the little
yeah, sorry.
wick
It's that one you like light a match, touch to the fuse, and then it goes off. And
Yeah.
I remember first encountering playing like Age of Empires, Age of Kings, being like, wait, these lads have guns? What?
Yeah.
But to be fair, that's supposed to be a historical game, right? So I was more surprised that guns are there. But no, yeah, like stuff like that, yeah, and like particularly like if you look at like ancient China, they had like firearms or something.
They had
similar to
gunpowder
firearms.
long before the
Way
West did
before.
gunpowder.
There's also that I'm not entirely sure on how historically accurate this is, or in terms of like it may just be like a myth or like a story of it, but the Hwoarang, I'm definitely pronouncing that wrong. They were like a legendary, like a very very famous group of Korean warriors, back in sort of like that similar kind of period, kind of like middle age kind of period in Korea. I think I'm getting that right anyway. But they had a thing called a hwacha, and it was basically like they made one on MythBusters. It was basically like a bunch of bamboo pipes all stacked on top of each other, and every one of them was filled with a rocket, and then all the fuses came back to one. So you'd light it on fire, and then they'd all go off, and it would just like rocket. It was basically like rocket propelled arrows from a giant Gatling gun.
Yes. I only noticed because speaking of Age of Empires, I think this is in one of the Age of Empires games.
It wouldn't surprise me if it was. Yeah, man, those Age of Empire games are great.
Yeah,
I downloaded them all on Steam.
I was only thinking recently, like, I know the third one gets a lot of bad press as being like not as good, but it's a period I enjoy historically more, which is like it's kind of colonial period and stuff like that, where like, I just think everything about that period is very interesting. Horrible shit happened, by the way, but it is an interesting read and stuff like that. But yeah, I've definitely seen these are like the like medieval equivalent of those like mobile missile platforms, you know, the ones that just lift up and like rotate.
It's like they're in it's like the medieval equivalent of a kill streak in COD. Like it's just
exactly. Yeah, after you stab enough people with a sword, you unlock one of these. It's just like missiles everywhere.
Oh man, excellent.
That's really cool. But yeah, so like yeah, absolutely, guns been around since like forever. Just not in the same form as we tend to think of them nowadays. Yeah. But yeah, the idea of like an ignition and a propellant and then some sort of metal object flying at your enemy, that has been a concept that has been around for a very very long time. And as such, like I really enjoy using it in my D&D game. I think it adds a whole other kind of dimension to the fantasy where you can kind of dip into that kind of colonial kind of flintlock. You can go to that different ways, like flintlock and stuff like that, or matchlock or wheel lock.
Yeah.
Or you can just straight up have revolvers and go steampunk and be like a sky cowboy.
It's not a good movie, but the Hugh Jackman Van Helsing has really fun.
Love that movie.
That's kind of how I envision. It's a terrible movie, but that like the gadgets and stuff are really good. The game was actually really fun. It was definitely bad, but it was fun.
I love that movie. Like unironically, it's bad, but it's like good bad.
Yeah,
it's like an enjoyable watch, even though it's kind of like campy and you know whatever. But it's a good watch.
Kate Beckinsale is in it. I'd watch it any day.
Yeah, exactly. She got really typecast in the whole vampire thing.
Did. But to be fair, those Underworld movies are also phenomenal. And like
I've only seen a couple of the Underworlds.
Okay, so like I'm gonna dial that back actually. Sorry, 1 is phenomenal. 2 is pretty good. 3 is, and I don't really know about any of the other ones. I think there's one called Rise of the Lycans.
Something like that, yeah.
But the first 2 I really enjoyed. Is
it Underworld or is it Blade that they use UV infused bullets?
Both.
Okay.
So in Underworld, they the vampire, because it's vampires versus werewolves in Underworld.
Yeah.
In Underworld, the vampires carry like they basically have like a Q from James Bond that works in their vampire mansion hideout, and he makes like UV rounds for them, and then I'm absolutely certain at some point in one of the Blade movies he had UV rounds, if not in one of the games or possibly the comics as well. But then what I thought was also kind of cool with I'm pretty sure the werewolves in Underworld also carried like specific like anti-vampire bullets too.
With a garlic infused blades? Oh no, sorry, that's blade again. Actually,
Yeah.
he has a garlic infused blade.
He does. Like it's a steak. Aha! So I didn't even mean to do that.
He's just there with the blade on one counter and an actual like meat steak on another. It's like a little bit for you,
little bit for me.
Can he eat garlic? I don't know a lot about Blade.
He can't be destroyed by the sun. I'm pretty sure he's okay.
Oh, that's true, because he's half vampire, isn't he?
He is, yeah. He's half vampire. I think he doesn't like it, though, if I remember right. He doesn't
It's
like
like,
it,
yeah.
which is a shame, because garlic makes everything taste great.
It does until it's too much of it. I love garlic. Normally, it's hard to hit my like max garlic threshold. I think it's really off topic.
I was just thinking, we went from like Gunslinger to Van Helsing movies to Underworld to Blade to Blade has a garlic infused sword. So I don't really like garlic too much.
There's a new Chinese restaurant that Tara really likes, but I'm kind of like on it. I'm kind of so. And only because the noodles they have are like, they're quite tasty. They're very garlicky, but in the moment you're eating them, it's like, okay, very garlicky, but still tasty. You know, this is good. That's fine. And it's later on when you cannot get the, like, not even in your mouth, but like in your stomach and in your throat, you cannot shake the taste of garlic. Like,
okay,
yeah, it just stuck around in a way that like 3 hours later, like I was still tasting garlic, and no matter if I drank or ate anything else, I could not suppress it, because it was insanely garlicky. But yes, that's a little story about Conor's garlic thresholds, which are very high, but were met apparently by this new place. Martin, you mentioned there about we talked about UV bullets and garlic infused blades. We've talked as well before about because you have a player in your game who's playing a rogue swashbuckler gunslinger fighter.
Correct. I'll pull up his sheet here so I can tell you the exact breakdown. But yeah, he's primarily, I would say, is like, yeah, he's basically a pirate, and then like he was using his gun and his sword while he was just being the swashbuckler, and like he was kind of like, oh, I don't know what to do with my next level. I was like, well, if you wanted to, you could dip into fighter. Even if you only go 3 levels into it, you can get like a fighting style, second wind, action surge, and there's a gunslinger, a fighter subclass as well. So it could make you even better with your guns if you want to go that way. And I'm just going to pull up here. We're level 14 at the moment, and he is, I think he's like 9 levels in rogue and 5 in gunslinger. Oh no, so 8 in rogue and 6 in fighter. So he's got six gunslinger levels, and it's honestly been both challenging because obviously gunslingers can output a lot of damage, particularly because he's doing the Matt Mercer critical role gunslinger build, which is just a damage machine. It just is, it's great. But he pumps out a lot of damage, but it's been very, very fun too, because like I think probably my favorite thing about the gunslinger, specifically the Matt Mercer one, is that it gives you so many options to like create homebrew and just tinker and make cool things that can actually contribute and be worthy. Like literally last session, they made like tiny small grenades so that the sorcerer's like raven psychic can fly up in the air with these little
drop them.
Yeah, he's literally got like a little bomb vest. And like he can just fly over and just like peck the vest and it drops a grenade, and like
that's a Call of Duty kill streak.
Yeah. No, do you know what it is? It's the
it's bombs activated.
Isn't that very similar to like a power up you get in like AC Odyssey, isn't it? Or you've like the Falcon, and he can like do magic with the Falcon.
I haven't played Odyssey. Sorry, I was trying to think because I always get Odyssey and Origins mixed up. I played Origins. I haven't gotten to Odyssey.
Oh, sorry, that's what I meant. It was Origins.
Was it? Okay.
Is there not like a bird companion in Origins?
You do, yeah. He's like you can scout or like scan the map and stuff. I think there might be enough because it's obviously there's a lot of RPG elements. There might be some stuff where like you can have him swoop down and attack people or something to like distract them while you sneak up or something like that. Yeah.
No, but like they were on an airship for a few days, so he was like, can I just make normal, like, non-magical bombs? And I was like, you have the powder, you have scrap metal, because he's always like taking bits and buying like stuff whenever he's making it. But like I was like, Yeah, all right, yeah, go ahead. And I just had him make a tinkering check, or rather, a tinkering check, to just determine how many he could make in the time. So I think it was like a 3-day travel. So I had him make a roll, and I think he ended up being able to do 3, so 1 a day. Which wasn't too bad. That's like, no, that is like an 8-hour work day, like easily.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
And it is, and as well, because it's like disposable. It's like a one-use grenade, like, you know. But grenades do
I do the same thing.
5d6.
If an item is disposable, I knock the cost and the cost to buy or the cost to make, and also the time to make it down considerably. It did the Xanathars always recommends doing half of the cost and stuff. Like that's still too much. I do like maybe like a fifth, maybe 10 to 20% of the cost, because again, if you're going to use it once and then maybe just a one-off thing, or it lasts an hour only or something like that, I feel like that's a fairer trade than half the cost, because half the cost for a very rare item can still be like a couple of grand, you know.
Oh yeah, totally. And like, particularly because he described it, he said he wanted to make like crude ones, nothing like super like special, super fancy or like sophisticated. Literally just wanted like a bunch of black powder in a metal container with a firing pin in it.
I'm thinking Powder from Arcane.
Yeah.
She's just like with these like gammy looking kind of like cogs and other like a paint can or something that's kind of cobbled together, and it's kind of jittery looking, and it's like look, it will definitely blow up. It's a matter of when it will blow up. You know?
And how many of your friends it will kill.
No. I should rewatch that show, man.
Oh, it's
I've
so
watched
good.
it in a while.
I watched like a boxing coach react to all the scenes of Vi's boxing during Arcane, and man, I forgot how good the fight scenes in Arcane were. Holy crap!
Fight scenes in that whole show is like, it's story wise, it's fantastic, and the world is amazing. And
Also,
stuff, but man,
a great example of guns in a fantasy setting.
True, very true. But that show is just like a visual treat for the eyes. It is just, every scene is gorgeous to look at.
That's
it's so stylized, and the landscape is good, the art style is good, the voice acting, animation, everything about that show is such an absolute treat.
Yeah. I love how they do it, where they do all the 3D modeling, and we will get back to guns really quick, I promise. They do all the 3D modeling and animation, and then like for any like effects, say it's like fire or sparks or smoke, all those kind of particle effects are 2D hand animated, and that's why it looks so good. Like that one scene where Jinx is like, it's when they're like teenagers, and she finds the like flare Vi gave her back in the day, and she like sets it off, like that. All the animation of like her taking that out, lifting it in the air, and pulling the pin to set the flare off, all of that is 3D animated, and like it's rigged and got a model and stuff. But then all of the smoke that comes out of that is all 2D hand animated by artists. It's insane.
That was the same technique they used when they were making Disney's Treasure Planet, which is kind of a forgotten gem in the repertoire of Disney animated films. But I watched a thing about it a while back, and it was like, that movie was set up to fail. They were given a poor release date in the middle of, like, in a weird time of year that they knew wouldn't get a lot of audiences. And it was immediately followed by something else that got much better reception. And also it was really expensive to animate, because they had to do like 2D animation for the majority of it, but like Long John Silver's arm in it, which is robotic, is all 3D rendered. So, and also melding those two together is a lot of work. So it's a great movie, and it looks amazing still to this day. But it had a lot going against it in terms of getting good recognition and being, a fan favorite.
Actually, that chat was relevant, because we're going to talk about something from that universe later, aren't we?
Are we? From Treasure Planet?
No, Arcane. Sorry.
From Arcane. Oh, sorry, we are. Sorry.
Yeah. But to give you an idea, and I was kind of saying, like, one of my favorite things about the Gunslinger is just like the creativity and versatility and inventiveness you can have with it. So I have on my other screen here open every single like unique, this like magical round my Gunslinger has made, and we're going to play.
So for context, for those who don't know, like we said, one of Martin's players does play Gunslinger, but they have a good knack for killing monsters, harvesting parts, and then incorporating them into special bullets, essentially.
Yeah, just remember that when you tell players that if they kill monsters, they can take bits from them and make them into magic items, remember they will remember that for their lives.
Yeah.
Like, they will never forget this. And full credit to Steve, he has never forgotten it. Anytime they kill anything, that is particularly difficult or particularly cool, he gets a few bits. Like even like he made he has a sniper rifle. He crafted a sniper rifle per the table in the gunslinger section of the book, and he crafted it, and it's called the Broken Bell, and he made it from monster bits. Like it's got like a bunch of different like monster horns and claws and teeth and fangs kind of added to it as accents, and it's like I think it's like covered in like scales, and it's got all this mad stuff. But what he's really good for, and what he does an awful lot, will be like between arcs. You know the way there's those inevitable like 2 to 3 sessions between an arc normally, like when one arc ends and the other one starts, that kind of mid ground between the two, where everyone just kind of like restocks and resupplies and shops and kind of stuff like that. Anytime we hit a few sessions like that, Steve will always be like, I want to go back to this NPC, this guy who made he's a guy called Alston Bodynock. He's a gnome artificer. Yes, if you look in the book, those are the first 2 suggested names for the first and last name for a male gnome. Thank you. But he is again artificer, and he makes magic bullets, and so like Steve will literally rock up to this guy's stall in the market and like dump a sack of monster bits on the table and be like, right, I have ideas, let's see. But Connor, let's play a game. How many individual custom magic rounds do you think my player has made? Every single one of them is unique.
How many custom magical rounds?
In terms of like different types. How many different types?
Different types. Yeah. I'm gonna say 12 different kinds.
Damn, not super far off. He's made 8 at the moment, but he has also recently sent me like a shopping list of like random stuff he has, and it's like, this is for Alston Bodynock. Arander's just going to ask him what can he make out of this, and just to give you like a heads up before the session. And I was like, okay, cool, thanks. Yeah, thanks. But it's we've got 8 different ones, and they've all come in very, very clutch here and there. He's also got a set of walloping ammo, which is, I believe, a default. Is that a default in walloping ammo?
Walloping ammo? I don't think so.
I feel
it sounds like it's. I think a wallop ammo was from Green Arrow, wasn't it? That was the one with the boxing glove on the end of it.
Oh, sorry, no, that was a walloping arrow. This is walloping ammo. It's like it's just magic ammo that when you get hit by it, you have to make a DC 10 strength save or you get knocked prone.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's very he likes that a lot. That actually came in really clutch once when they were defending the walls of a city, and this undead giant zombie was like crawling up the wall, and he was like, "Oh, it's never gonna work, but screw it, walloping ammo," and he just shot the giant in the face, and I was like, "Oh, like zombie giant, it's got like a +8 to its strength save." Yeah. You're like, "Oh yeah, impossible for this to fail." Rolls a 1. Like you turn around and you shoot this giant in the face with such force that it just gets blasted back off the wall and falls 40 feet, and it fucking died because of the damage, because he sneak attacked it. He just walked up to it because it was like climbing, like Attack on Titan style. It's like head comes over the wall and he just goes bang and shoots it in the face, and it's just like boom backwards onto the ground. It's very fun, but he's got binding rounds, which are these are a more recent invention. They are bullets imbued with the Earthbind spell, DC 15. He used one of these to absolutely destroy a battle. I think it's a battle pact or battle force angel in a recent combat, because he just turned around, got the sniper, shot it in the face with a binding round. It failed the save. They're on an airship that's going like pretty damn fast, and all the others are flying. So as soon as the thing failed its save, it just started going and just like falling, and then the next turn it also failed the save on Earthbind, so it just kept falling. So he just entirely took a whole enemy out with one shot, just removed it from the fight, just because Earthbind round, it can't fly anymore, and we're like 100 feet in the air. Or hundreds of feet rather. He's got corrosive rounds, which do exactly what they say in the tin, except they do have the same similar effect as vitriolic sphere, where it does on impact it does 44 acid damage, and then if on the next turn a creature doesn't use its action to get rid of the acid or get help to take it off, it takes half that acid damage again, but only the acid damage. Like it won't take the actual bullet damage anymore. That one he made from the stomach of a dire troll. We also has frostbite ammunition, which was made from the frost giant zombie.
That's cold and necrotic, right?
Cold and necrotic, yeah. Giant slayer ammo does what it says in the tin. Hellfire point bullets are bullets made from the stomach contents of a remoras, and they're like loaded into the top of the point. Like, do you ever see Constantine and he's got the bullets with the holy water in the heads?
I don't. I'm gonna Google it now, though.
I think that's either Constantine or Blade. But he's got
back on Blade.
One of the two. Oh, Blade has lots of cool bullets, man. But it's basically like a hollow point. It's a bullet with a hollow point at the top, and that point is filled with like. Do you know the way if you? I think it's the Ramirez.
Oh, there's a Hellboy one. Is it Hellboy?
That's it. That's what I'm thinking of. Yes. Yeah. It's basically that, but instead of holy water, it's the like fiery stomach acid of a Ramirez. It's got one called iron slug rounds, and they are like noticeably bigger, heavier bullets that they like to do an additional D4 piercing, and it's a DC 13 strength save for being knocked prone when you're hit with them.
Nice.
Rising rounds, which is a bullet that subjects the target to the effects of the levitation spell.
That is such a good idea.
Yeah,
I love that. Because there's games I've played, like maybe Dishonored, or maybe it's Dishonored, or maybe it's the other one, the new one they have, based like the kind of 70s, 60s motif. But it's definitely games I've played where like you have powers and you can raise an enemy up, and then when they're in the air, shoot them because they're like helpless. That's such a clever idea.
And then lastly, we've got witch tooth ammunition, which are like they're like bullets, but rather than like the metal part of the like head of the bullet. I don't know the technical term for this.
That's the bullet. Yeah. The casing is the back part.
Yeah. So the casing, rather than having the whole top of the bullet be like the lead and metal jacket or whatever. It's made from a sharpened hag's tooth. So it's like got the casing and then there's just like a big dirty like yellow green tooth sticking out of it. And that one just does an additional D4 necrotic damage on it. And I always describe it as like the bullet hits and like the tooth sinks in, and then all the teeth, just like the tooth explodes into like razor sharp fragments that like pepper all over the person.
Very cool.
Yeah, but like honestly, for most of these, he's just described what he wants it to do, or he has been like, what could I make from X monster? I've never really had to like. All of these are basically entirely his creation. The most I did was give them names. Really, that's all I did.
Yeah.
And it's just super fun to have someone like, and I don't mind like making kind of powerful ones either, because like, as long they're disposable. So the crafting time and crafting cost are both way lowered. He's a gunslinger anyway, so he should be. If I'm a gunslinger in the fantasy world, I want to have like literally like a Hellboy style like case of crazy bullets that I can pull out for any situation, It's very, very fun as a DM just to and it also occasionally throws me for a bit of a loop when I am not prepared for him to ask about making a specific brand new kind of bullet, and I have to be like okay, but like they're always hype, and it's always really great when like he uses a bullet that has like an unusual effect, or maybe it has a particularly low DC and it doesn't go off. Like he'll get the damage, but it doesn't go off in the way it's supposed to a number of times, and then finally the one time it happens, it's like so exciting, like everyone freaks out. Like with the walloping ammo. Walloping ammo, I'm pretty sure is in, if you go into D&D Beyond into the equipment, I think it's there.
I've not come across. It doesn't. It kind of sounds familiar, but again, I'm pretty sure I'm thinking of like the boxing glove thing from Green Arrow.
Yeah, and looking, what's really good as well is
it is magic walloping ammunition.
Yeah.
It's in Sanithar's Guide.
Yeah.
Oh, it is. Do you know? Yeah, it's in that the common magic items section with the cape that always billows and stuff like that.
Yes. Oh my god, I love it. But like those are really fun, and those are exactly what I mean by like they're just super useful because they're a common magic item that makes the gun magical. Like, because the problem with a lot of gunslingers is like you kind of need to have a magic gun because that's your main source of damage output. Making a magic gun is going to cost a lot of time and a lot of gold. So quite brilliantly, honestly, to be honest, Steve has like entirely avoided the necessity of like spending a ridiculous amount of gold and time to make like I don't know, a very rare magic sniper rifle that does all this crazy stuff. And instead what he's done is he has made a cool, like a visually like really interesting and like cool personal like normal sniper rifle. And then what he spent his time in gold on instead is making unique and cool bullets and different rounds. And by the way, those are also split between pistol rounds and sniper rifle rounds too. So he'll make different ones for both.
Pretty cool.
It's really fun.
I haven't actually run anyone. Well, no, sorry, that's not true.
Aerith.
Aerith had guns, but he was born out from a boy. But Aerith had guns, but he was a blood hunter, so he wasn't actually in the full gunslinger experience. I found that we obviously, because I didn't really have solid rules for when he first started, we kind of like tweaked it as we went and stuff. We found something that kind of worked. Is there anything about guns or firearms in D&D that you've experienced as someone who's running, a full-on gunslinger that you would see as a drawback? For either for the player or for you as a DM, or does it complicate things in any way, other than, like you said, having to come up with unique ammunitions or write out the rules for them kind of on the fly sometimes?
So, well, like the unique ammunition thing, I would almost look in the same way as, like, say if like someone's playing like a ranger or even just a ranged fighter or like a crossbow wielder or something, and they wanted to make like unique disposable arrows. That's the same way I'd look at that. But in terms of like, so. I know it's probably something you're going to touch on in a lot greater detail, but there is definitely some confusion and some lack of clarity regarding rules surrounding guns in D&D. Very true. Thankfully for me, I haven't had to interact with a whole bunch of them, because what's happening. I'm pretty sure he has it, but I need to look at my Steve's feats real quick. I love D&D Beyond that I can just do this. Like, this is so handy. Where are we? Features and traits, class features. Proficiency.
And as an aside as well, do you how do you visualize, or how does your player visualize guns in the world? Because obviously there's mechanically how they function, but also there's how they are represented in terms of, are they like old style matchlocks? Are they flintlocks? Are they kind of slightly more modern kind of breech loading things, or how do they kind of visualize or kind of translate like that to you?
So that one I can answer for you right now, and I get around to how the thing about the rules as well. Start off when we started off with it, because he started with a gun. So he started with a flintlock. No, sorry, he didn't start with a gun. It's just been so long. I assumed he did. But like eventually, when he first started using guns, he started doing like cutlass and pistol, like your classic pirate style. Those were flintlock. He always described them as flintlock in keeping with the whole pirate thing. Then as he kind of branched out into the gunslinger stuff more, he started designing more modern guns then from that. So like we went from like a flintlock then to I think then the next gun he made, or I think he might have bought it as well, I think it was the pepper box, the like 4-shot, you load it in the front. Percy's gun from the Legend of Vox Machina, if anyone's unfamiliar. And also a historical weapon. They're really, really cool. And they look like they work exactly the same way.
It took an absolute lifetime to reload, because you had to do each barrel. They were muzzle loading, so each one had to be loaded from the front, and you had to do each of them individually. Percy obviously has that cool little gadget where he just sticks it in and twists it.
That's so cool. Oh.
Very, very cool. But great guns at the time, because each barrel is loaded separately. You can fire, pull back the trigger, twist it, and fire again. Like that, the rate of fire for that time was insane. Unheard of elsewhere.
That was kind of the first like one where he could have it, where it was like he had more than one shot, because it was like Percy's one where it shoots and it revolves around, rather than the actual historical one, which just fired 4 bullets at once. It was like a death cube, and for real though. Then after that he upgraded to like a 4-shot. No, sorry, that was the 4-shot. Then after that he upgraded to an Exandria pistol. He made one of those during the downtime, and then as well, because he is a gunslinger, during their early-ish travels, they ran into an NPC that I had called Captain Sariel Fay, and she is like the head privateer for the Elven Kingdoms. She's like this legendary like swashbuckling pirate who basically has gone legit and is working as like an essentially an imperial pirate defending the Elven Kingdoms.
Oh, the irony.
I know, right? But defending the Elven Kingdoms, and so like I already had her in as a gunslinger, and by the time when I had set her up as, I wanted her to be basically that kind of like, actually I think I kind of like at least partially based her off of Miss Fortune from League of Legends, who is this like pirate captain who has 2 pistols, and her name is Sarah Fortune. She's Miss Fortune. But I kind of partially based her off her, and she's very much in a similar thing where she has like short sword, and she has a short sword, 2 pistols, and a shotgun. And that's her kind of kit. And when he met her, he was instantly like, oh, there's someone who like makes guns. And I think they were like around level 6 or 7 around then. And when I built her for that occasion, I think she was around level 10. So she would have been a lot more advanced in gunsling, because I think he only had maybe 2 levels of gunslinger at the time.
Yeah.
Or fighter even. But he has since then basically become a student of that NPC, and during downtime has gone and like trained with her further to like learn more gunslinger stuff and get taught more gunslinger stuff. And actually at the moment, so he took the cybernetic eye from the shaman from the evil cyborg storm giants that they fought.
Yes.
When they killed him, he took that eye because he was like, oh, this is really cool, maybe I can use it for like a scope or something. And he took it with him, and I was like, yeah, absolutely. And then I was waiting to see what he would do, and then he absolutely completely like caught me off guard. We were doing like a downtime thing, and they were all, during this one downtime for like 8 weeks, all of them stayed in this in Captain Faye's mansion, because she's got like an arcana forge and like a smithy and like everything you would need to make both mundane and magical items. And so they were all using her stuff, and during that time then he like came up to her and he was like, do you look, this is, he like showed her the eye and was like, this is like a highly advanced like cybernetic eye. I will give this to you if you will work on a project for me. And I was like, I wrote like, this character is like super inquisitive about like tech and is like constantly like, she has the most advanced guns of anyone in the world. She's very much like the Percy Drole of my world.
Yeah.
And so he traded her that eye, and she is making him like a modular attachment for his sniper rifle that'll like slot in and like give like, I think it'll like let him fire lightning bullets maybe.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, but that'll be like, that'll be a quest line. Like he gave that to her like, I want to say nearly 2 months ago at this stage, like out of game time. That'll be a quest line that kind of runs for a while, and like I don't know, at a time I think is like appropriate or like dramatically fitting, I will have her like reappear and hand off the actual the modular thing. Not quite sure what to call it yet. Volt thrower I was kind of thinking, but I'm pretty sure I stole that from something else.
Hey, that's what D&D is all about.
Yeah. Oh no, that's what I named the lightning gauntlets when I was like thinking of what to make them, when I was asking you if I could make them in our game. The Stormhawks.
Oh yes. Yeah.
I was going to call them volt throwers because like a bolt thrower. But anyway, I've talked for an exceptionally long amount of time.
No, that's it. Hey, I asked you a question and you answered very thoroughly, and I appreciate it.
It's very thoroughly.
So like, yeah, you've had quite a considerable experience with running for a gunslinger player.
The question you asked me about the rules and stuff, the way I get around it is he has firearm proficiency from gunslinger, and I just treat it as I would any other weapon basically. He doesn't have gunner, but because he's going through the Matt Mercer gunslinger thing, he'll get to a stage where he can reload as a bonus action, and he's got a 6-shooter now. So realistically, most combats don't last 6 shots.
That's fair. That's very fair. I'm actually glad you brought up the disparity between some of the, let's say, primary content that Wizards have created and published themselves, and then the gunslinger, the Matthew Mercer gunslinger, and that is of course made famous by Percy Durolo. I have, as I've mentioned before, beef is a very strong way of putting it, but I do have my qualms with the design of these two things and how they do not synergize for me in the game. I actually wanted to have a quick look through the gunslinger class with you. We won't spend too long on it, but I wanted to look through it. And I wanted to kind of go through the parts that like I feel work and don't work and stuff like that. Primarily, it is a very, very good class, but there is just some key design choices that I take issue with. So, for starters, we get the gun firearm proficiency at third level, which makes sense. You can always change this for your home game, but firearm proficiency is not something that is innately granted by any class other than this one subclass in the game.
I see. Weirdly, I would rule any class that gets proficiency with all martial or melee weapons. I include firearms as a martial weapon.
I do the same. In my mind, it's like if you have proficiency in a crossbow, like a hand crossbow that functions like a pistol, so you have proficiency in those, and likewise with like light and heavy crossbows for any sort of rifle as well.
Yeah.
Because that the functionality is similar enough that I'm like, look, you know how to point a two-handed thing at a person and also engage in some sort of complex reloading process.
Yeah.
So that translates in my mind. So you get that. That makes perfect sense, that you would be granted that at third level right off the bat. The next thing we get is gunsmith, and immediately this is where my problem starts with. This is a bit more indicative of something kind of coming up next in this section, which is the misfire property.
Yeah.
But I'm not crazy about the idea that as part of being a gunslinger, you also have to kind of be a gun engineer, a weaponsmith on the side. Because although, like you said, it is very fun to be able to craft your own ammos and stuff like that, and that's totally fine. For me, I find that and even actually in the section that says gunsmith, it mentions about getting ammunition. Oh, sorry, it's actually further down. It mentions the ammunition thing, and how ammunition is very hard to come by, and each weapon uses its own unique ammunition, and they wouldn't be sold in shops, so they might be very hard to find. All of that to me is very, very setting specific for Exandria, for Critical Role, which is fine if that's the kind of world you're running. But it for me is too rigid in the same way that, like in the Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide, the Blade Singer was a subclass that only elves could be, and that was also specific to that setting, as was the Dwarven Battle Rager, which you could only be if you were a dwarf. It's just a little too linear in that way for my taste.
No, I can see where you're coming from. Like, I do agree that it is a bit strange that in your class description it says, like, ammunition is, like, it's on your... you described it perfectly in saying that it's setting info. Like, what setting info shouldn't really be in a class.
Absolutely, and I get that, like, this occupies a very weird space because it is unofficial material.
Yeah, and it's also a Pathfinder conversion.
Exactly, yeah. So there's elements to it where I'm like, look, I get why it is the way it is, but also I feel like if I was really trying to make this work for 5th edition, I wouldn't have made certain choices like this. The firearm, so there's a few of the properties of the firearm that are kind of fine. Reload works pretty well if you want to go towards a more gunslingery, what you call it, kind of revolver style thing and all that. In terms of numbers, the amount of bullets that it holds, 6 works really, really well, but other numbers don't. So if you have bigger rifles which you want to have less rounds in, which would make sense, that doesn't always translate in terms of the action economy for players or that might be playing a different class, we'll say. One thing about this that doesn't, like you said, you kind of weren't really sure where things lay with rules and ruling certain things, because there's 2 sets of rules. There is the Dungeon Master's Workshop stuff from the Dungeon Master's Guide, and that gives you certain rules involving firearms. Most notably, the reload option in that is you can reload as an action or a bonus action. That's just innately part of it. Whereas in the subclass, there is a completely separate set of rules. The reload property in that tells you can reload as an action or by using one of your attacks to reload. This doesn't translate super well to classes or to people in other classes that might decide they want to wield a firearm as part of their character, which is one of the kind of like grinding points for me, is that it's not super universal. It's like you can be a gunslinger or you can wield a firearm if you be this very specific subclass, and outside of that, then the rules get super murky and don't always line up really well. Let's say, for example, like if you were to play a game and one person was a gunslinger using these rules, do you also apply these rules outside of this subclass to, I don't know, the rogue who decides they want to use a pistol or something as well? You know, it's not super clear in that regard.
Yeah.
A lot of this is going to be the kind of like what's it called, bookkeeping kind of stuff in
Yeah.
that regard. But it is still something that I feel like I don't think enough effort was made, in my opinion, to make this fit with 5th edition really well. I feel like some tweaks could have been made, and not even a lot. But I feel like some tweaks could have been made.
I would like if like tomorrow Matt Mercer just like as he's wants to do actually on his Twitter account, just post an entirely new updated version of the class like he did with Bloodhunter before, where it's just like, hey, I just updated Bloodhunter. Here you go, everyone. If he did one for these for this where he like made it more streamlined with the 5e firearm rules, kind of took out some of those more Pathfindery elements. I won't lie, I would be very happy. I'd be like, awesome,
agreed.
new updated I nearly said sharpshooter, a new updated gunslinger. That would be really fun. Or even if he just made more gun-based classes, like if he made like a sharpshooter class or something like that, that could be cool.
Wait for it. I had an epiphany earlier on.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah. Only way to describe it. We move on to the other 3rd level, but you get a lot of at least a 3rd level with this. But we get Adept Marksman, which is where we get our grit and our trick shots, and this is the part of the class I think is absolute gold.
Yeah, this is everything that makes the Battle Master great, but with a gun.
We've been saying it for a long time, you and I, about how the fighter should innately just have superiority dice as part of the core class, and then all the subclasses should feed off of that.
Yeah.
Because this should just be what fighters do. But regardless, I do think the trick shots work well. And obviously, there's a little bit of an archaic thing here with wisdom being your determining modifier, which is weird because I'm pretty sure this jumped onto D&D Beyond after Tasha's. I could be wrong on that, but I feel like it was after Tasha's.
Yeah.
And the trend in Tasha's at that point was that things are now based on proficiency as opposed to modifiers. If I was going to run it, I would tell a player, hey, look, you have this many grip points, because that makes more sense in my mind.
I would do the same for someone to play like an arcane archer as well, because I know we both have our bugbears with that too.
Yeah. We get level 7, we get quick draw, add your proficiency bonus to your initiative. I love that for the flavor of being able to draw a gun really fast like a cowboy.
So good.
Great stuff.
It's so good. And it actually, like, I will say, Swashbuckler Rogue and Gunslinger actually pair together incredibly well, because Swashbuckler Rogue, there's I believe it's called Parting Shot. If you attack, so you basically have the mobile feat if you attack someone this round.
That's right. Yeah.
So like you. Can,
it's called, isn't it?
It's like a charisma thing.
Panache or something like that?
Panache.
Panache.
That's it. Sorry, Panache. It's Panache. I love it. It's Panache. It's Panache. And like, if he tries to hit something this round, I think it hits it. He can't make an opportunity attack on him when he goes away. So he'll often run in, and at the moment he's got a cutlass that can turn into a trident if he wants to do like a two-handed attack.
Yes.
So he'll often run in with the cutlass and trident mode and do like a two-handed trident attack, and then because he's done that, he'll dodge back out of range, pull out his pistol, and just shoot something in the face.
And he can do it. But it's actually that works really well. That also lets you draw and store firearms, so you're basically swapping out a gun in the round. Maybe not the most useful thing, but there's definitely situations I can see that working.
If you have like a Neo coat full of guns, absolutely.
Rapid repair again comes off the kind of engineering side of the class, which I don't necessarily want to be someone who is engineering inclined. I might just want to be a soldier, and I might not want to have that additional. I might not want to work that part of it into my. Don't get me wrong. There's obviously real life soldiers have to know how to clean and maintain their firearms and stuff like that. But for the fantasy of it, I feel like there's an aspect here where it's really wanting you to be Percy, and that rubs me the wrong way. I love Percy. Percy's one of my favorite characters in Campaign 1, but I just like that. I would like if the class was a little more open, so that we could have a lot of different characters that are gunslingers, and not just everyone's kind of a clone of Percy.
Yeah, no, I do get that. I think the engineering thing, I think that comes from more so like Old West style gunslingers, like they would make their own bullets. Like even now, lots of people in the States they still make their own bullets, even though hilariously weirdly you can go out to Walmart and buy like a bag of Doritos and a bag of like hollow point bullets.
Yeah.
But we won't get into that. It's just, but like, yeah, it's just, I think that's more so what it is rather than specifically Percy. But I think it's like this. Again, you're totally right that this class is so inherently intertwined with Percival the Rolo. It's very hard to not see only Percy.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I wouldn't discount that side of things entirely. If I was going to make changes to this, one thing I thought would be a cool thing. I don't know what level I'd put it at, but maybe like on a long rest you can recover or craft your proficiency mod bullets. So you're just there, you're getting ready to go to bed at night. You have a couple of empty casings. You're tapping some extra loose powder you have lying around into it, and you can just get a couple bullets back. Because the one thing about this class is that bullets are not recoverable.
Yeah.
They do cost money. So other than like archers and crossbow wielders and stuff don't have this problem. I would feel like that would help to mitigate your gold cost potential a little bit. Is that you, on a long rest, you're like, hey, I'm just sitting around the campfire. It's the end of the day. I picked up a couple of casings after the fight. I'm just fiddling with them, and I'm remaking them.
I maybe wouldn't do that around the campfire.
Not it.
But no, I like that idea. I think you could do something very similar as well. Maybe in terms of, do you know how the Zealot Barbarians extra damage when on its first hit when it's raging is worked out, where it's like it'd be like half your current level rounded up, or shall we say, something like that. So like whatever, like say if you're like a level 20 fighter, like after in a long rest you can make 10 bullets, something like that.
Yeah, that works absolutely. Next up we have lightning reload. Again, I feel like if we're going by the DMG rules or trying to synergize with them more, this could be changed. This could be changed. I think the level 15 thing in other classes is the one where like if you start a combat without any grip points, you get a grip point. You could substitute something like that.
I think you do you not get that?
You don't get that with this, no.
Oh, okay.
But you get them back on a crit instead, which you don't get with superiority dice. We got Vicious Intent, which is you crit on a 19 or 20. We just mentioned it. I wouldn't like this, and it would seem kind of cheap because that's obviously the ability of the champion, but only for the fact that there is an inherent part of the class earlier where critting is a big deal because you get your grip points back. So I actually I like it only for the fact that it links back to that. Otherwise, I would feel like this is kind of a cheap level 18 thing,
I think the grit engine is one of the strongest points of the design in this subclass, actually.
Yeah, that you can, and like the way like you're kind of gambling a little bit because you're like you can spend a grip point to get advantage.
Yeah, Deadeye. You can Deadeye to get.
And which means, but if you get a 20 on one of those, you get that grip point you just spent back, which is like a cool system that you're kind of playing. It's definitely kind of riverboat gambler kind of feel. Which you enjoy.
Yeah. It's a great risk reward kind of thing.
Yeah, we have hemorrhaging critical, which you mentioned a while ago. After you score a critical hit, on the next turn, the target takes half of the damage it took from that turn, which is crazy powerful at high levels. Where like if you do crit and you roll additional damage and magic and special bullets and all that, and then on the next round all comes back again, or half that comes back again, is massive.
If you want to see this at its peak, search No Mercy Percy Returns in YouTube. You're welcome.
And then we just have a long list of our different abilities.
These
like
so
bully
good.
shot,
These are so
dazing,
good.
deadeye, disarming, forceful, piercing, and violent. And I love all of these. So there's definitely aspects of this class I do like, and I think the solid, to say there is solid bones or solid foundation in this is underselling it. There's way more than just a foundation here.
Oh yeah.
But I do feel like not enough of an effort was made. I don't know whether it's a case of Matt didn't want to go rejigging the class, or whether D&D Beyond were like, nah, leave it, it's fine, whatever, people will play it because it's Percy.
I would lean towards the second.
Probably.
Yeah.
Because again, if I was going to try and publish this on D&D Beyond, I would want it to synergize nicely with the game. Really, if I was going to change this is literally my next heading: fixing the fighter gunslinger.
Go on.
I don't think there's actually a lot you need to do. The biggest thing is I'd remove the misfire element, because nowhere else in the game, bar the orc, which is now discontinued in Volo's guide, do players from the race or class or whatever get a negative ability, to something to draw them back. It's different. Like the orc had like a negative int mod, which they've since ditched, and there's other reasons behind that as well. But I also feel like it's contradictory to the design of 5th edition, where here you get this ability and this ability and this ability. Go nuts. I find it's something I equate to poor homebrew design when I see it on the Unearthed Arcana subreddit, where people are designing something and they're like, "Oh, I'm going to design this cool subclass or this cool, custom race, something like that," and they give it like 8 really good things, and they're unwilling to compromise on. And 8 is way too much, so they're unwilling to compromise and remove 3 of them, because they love them all too much and they can't possibly decide which they're going to remove. And instead they go, well, we'll keep the 8 things, but what if I added in these 2 negative things instead? And then you're throwing more complicated rules on top, and it's a sloppy design technique. And adding the misfire in here to mitigate, I don't know, damage or whatever they think they're kind of mitigating with this is not indicative of 5th edition design. Now, Matt's obviously been playing D&D a lot longer. There's older editions that do have stuff like this. There's other game systems that have stuff like this. I just feel like, as per 5th edition, it's contradictory to the design of that. But if he's drawing on other inspiration, I can understand it as well. I just removed the misfire because it feels like an unnecessary penalty to the player. That would interfere with my fantasy of being the cool gunslinger in a fantasy world,
Yeah.
And the second thing is I would just tweak the rules kind of in general, just to align more with firearm rules that do fit with like other classes and stuff. Because again, we have 2 sets of rules here, one when you're playing this class and one when you're not, and they don't always line up, because if you take the ones from the DMG, you can reload as a bonus action pretty much right away, and then if you take the ones from this class, you can't reload as a bonus action until you hit level 15. The 2 of them just don't align nicely in that way. But yeah, that's other than that, I know I pointed out my problems with the gunslinger before, but again, really that's all I changed about it. Everything else, I love the like the quick draw stuff. I love the grit points. I love the heavy damage you can do with like vicious intent and hemorrhaging critical and stuff. Crazy good. But yeah, there's another couple things I wanted to bring up about running guns and the rules behind it, because as you know, the world I run does have firearms. Those firearms are kind of early breech loaders, meaning you don't load them from the front, but rather there's usually a slot or kind of a catch or a little door you open up, you pop the round in, you close it, you pull the hammer, you fire. And they're single shots. So you load a round, you close it all up, you fire it. You open it up and ditch the old round, you pop a new one in. And that's kind of a level of technology that's my preference. Obviously, people can decide they want to use muskets or flintlocks, particularly if it's a pirate theme thing. Flintlocks is kind of mostly where you want to go.
Yeah.
But for me, who overthinks things massively in terms of the functionality of it, even though it's a fantasy game where we roll dice at a table and imagine things, I put way too much thought into the level of technology that I want for these guns. And this is where I've landed, is that they're breech loaders like that. I also spent a very, very long time on them when comparing them to crossbows, because we have 2 other types of ranged weapons in the game. Well, mostly. We have bows and we have crossbows. And the only difference between them really is that the damage dice go slightly bigger. For crossbows, we have 1 crossbow that can be wielded in a single hand, which bows can't. And also they all have the loading property. I mean, you can only fire them once a round unless you take a feat. And I think even just with the rules for those 2 things, they don't. I think having to take a feat to justify using crossbows is actually a fairly heavy price. And I think a lot of people don't pick crossbows as a result. So I think there's kind of inherent flaws there, but that's a whole other podcast episode. But other than that, I do think that I spent a lot of time working out like the damages and stuff like that, because the damages they have in the book. See, you get the, like, let's say for example, there's a musket does a D12, and the pistol does a D10, right? Which would seem sensible enough, right? Because you're just kind of taking another step up in the damage dice from the other ones. So you go kind of bows, and then crossbows are slightly more powerful, and then firearms are slightly more powerful again. But there's something that I think gets, and you're kind of the idea, I guess, is kind of that you're looking at that as an offset or as a payment for the fact that these are going to do more damage. But then you get the extra dice. But there's another factor that I think people don't take into account as much, and that is that this ammunition is expendable. Whether you hit or miss, if you fire a bow and you miss something, there might be some circumstances where it misses the giant and falls into the pit of fire instead, and of course you're not getting that back. But in most cases, whether it hits you kill the giant, you can pull it off the giant's body later on when you're done the fight, or if it hits and just sticks into the ground near them, again you can also pick that up later. With bullets, as soon as you decide you're going to fire that bullet is gone. You have to mark that down because there's no way of recovering that afterwards. You fire and you hit, or you fire and you miss, but it is done regardless. And that additional cost, even though bullets aren't expensive, that racks up. I think it's 3 gold pieces for 10 bullets in the DMG. And if you're in most fights last like 3 to 4 rounds, we'll say you're not a fighter and you don't have 4 attacks per round or whatever. But you're a regular class, you have 2, you're doing 2 attacks per round. That's maybe 6 to 8 bullets, which is 3 gold pieces, almost 3 gold pieces, maybe 2 and a bit gold pieces per encounter that you have to invest in to be able to actually be involved in the fight. And so because they're not recoverable, I always feel like the damage could just be a little bit more. I use 2d4 instead of for my pistols, which puts them at a little bit higher, I believe, than.
There is an important thing to point out with the gunslinger class, though, in regards to that. You can craft ammunition for half the cost.
That is true. That is true. And even if we weren't going by that and going by my hypothetical one, where you can get X amount of them back on a long rest because you just sit there by the campfire, popping them together or making them or whatever, pressing them. That's it. You press bullets.
Yes.
But yeah, even if you were doing all that kind of stuff, the campfire, yeah, you'd mitigate quite a bit of it. I have an embarrassingly large. This is a weird sentence. I have an embarrassingly large spreadsheet, with all the different firearms where I try to work out what is the fairest way, of like in terms of damage increase versus are you using the reload or the loading properly, and how that happens over multiple rounds. And I basically came down to like, if you want a pistol that like has the same amount, or let's say they're all about 1.5 times the damage approximately that you get from crossbows,
right,
which to me felt like a fair trade-off in damage for like always consumable ammunition, and that kind of stuff. So that's the damage I kind of decided on, and I kind of found that, like, let's say take a pistol for example, if you do 2d4 over 4 rounds with the loading property, now we're going to assume you have the gunner feat, where you are making 2 attacks per round. It works out at about 40 damage over 4 rounds. And if you do, we're not counting modifiers in this, because it's a variable, but then you can do the same thing with 2d6 over a reload gun, like a revolver that has 6 shots, and that goes like 2 shots, 2 shots, and then 2 shots. And then you have to reload on the 4th round. And because you're reloading on that round as like an action or whatever, you're actually missing out on damage, and it kind of mitigates and works out in a similar way. I don't know where I was going with this. Sorry, I'm just saying I put a lot of work into trying to make firearms work fairly, in the game, fairly, but also fun as well. Matt Colville brings up a really good thing. He actually has a video about firearms in D&D. That's actually not a whole lot about firearms in D&D. Honestly, the video is called like "Should Firearms Be in D&D" or something like that. Go and watch it, but just be warned, he doesn't talk a whole lot about firearms in D&D. It's mostly a video about game design and system design.
Okay.
And he talks about like why would you want to put them in a game? First of all, is it just because you want to be that cool cowboy person? Well, then just reskin a crossbow and there you go, knock yourself out. Like, but if you're going to implement them, you should be implementing them in such a way that they are different and fun. Like, if you're just going to go crossbows that have 1 damage die higher, and they're loud, then there's not a whole lot different there. But he talked about like having a mechanic where like you could get a revolver, and you could fire once and be very accurate. You're taking your time, you're lining it up. You take 1 shot, and that shot's going to be very, very accurate. Or then the alternative is you could be like, I'm going to take 4 shots this round. I'm going to be a lot less accurate, but I'm going to potentially do a lot more damage because I'm hitting more people with this,
Yeah.
Which was a very, very interesting mechanic, and one that they actually do. And you brought this up a while ago. We were talking about Arcane.
Yes.
There was an amazing PDF that came out for a temporary promotional thing, where, as you know what it's called? What's the title of it? Is it Buildwater D&D?
Bilgewater, yeah.
Yes, it's called Legends of Runeterra: Dark Tides of Bilgewater, and it gives you some 5th edition kind of language if you wanted to play an adventure in Bilgewater.
Which I
It
would
gives
say
you
is an awesome setting. It's yeah.
yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if it showed up in Arcane soon, actually, because it's pretty close to Piltover and Zon. But it's basically like a pirate kingdom. It's a pirate
Yeah.
kingdom, and it's actually got quite a lot of similar vibes to Dishonored.
Yeah, yeah, it does a lot of like they've kind of like flintlocky type guns or
Yeah,
whatever. It does a lot of like swords and dueling, and it's on the coast, so it's a bit like Dunwall and stuff like that.
it's very like Magipunk almost as well in terms of like
Yeah,
the
there's some great
guns.
art actually in this
Yeah,
PDF.
the guns are like hex tech guns.
Yeah, and they look really kind of like they look like slightly magicked up, kind of old style flintlock or
Yes.
blunderbuss, where they have that kind of
Yeah.
trumpet barrel on them, where it
Yes.
spreads out wide at the end.
And actually,
Very cool.
included in that PDF is basically if you wanted to play as Caitlyn from Vi, there is a subclass in that PDF that is just her.
Well, this is the renegade, isn't it?
I think so.
So this is actually what I was going to talk about, and this is kind of coincides with what Matt Colville was saying in the video about having like you can shoot once and be accurate, or you can shoot multiple times, be less accurate, but potentially do more damage. Because this subclass is great. It's called the Renegade. It's a martial archetype, so it's a fighter subclass. You get some skills early on, but they get an innate weapon that they craft themselves. It's similar in vibe a little bit to the Percy thing, but I think functionally there's a lot of really good stuff in here. And the way that it works is you choose which type of weapon you want. You can be a pistolier or a sniper. The pistolier, the way it works is it has a 30-foot range. You make your attack. It's a D6 plus your dex mod, which is standard enough. The number of shots that can be fired during a single action increases when you reach higher levels. 2 shots at 5th level, 3 shots at 11th level, and 4 shots at 20th, which is in line with our kind of like multiple attacks as a fighter. So you're potentially going. That's the fan the hammer idea. That's you going bang 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 with your weapon. The other one from this then is sniper, where you always only make one attack.
But it hits like a train.
But it hits like a train. Is it's a D10 plus dex, and the range is also 120, so it's a lot further. But then the damage increases. 2d10 at 5th, 2d10 plus dex, I should say. 4d10 plus dex at 11th, and then 6d10 plus dex at 20th. Now you only get one attack per turn.
Yeah, but
again, that attack's gonna hit with the devastation of like I don't know, maybe a 4th or 5th level spell, give or take.
Yeah.
It's gonna have a serious damage. And I really love this. I think this is actually this. I love the idea that you give people the option, and I love the idea that of how it breaks down. A sniper is not going to be spamming the trigger trying to shoot multiple rounds. They're going to be like, take my time, line up my shot, and when I hit them, I'm going to hit them in the head. You know, it's going to be at the most lethal shot. Whereas the person with the gun is going to be the person who's like shooting from the hip, or possibly just like, you know, poking a hand over a wall and shooting blind or something like that. But I do love the idea and the kind of personality that's put into the two of these.
I don't know
there's
who
also
designed these classes, but they are all actually, because there's barbarians.
I want to say I think it was James Hake. I think he had a part in this.
I vaguely remember that, but like did for reference, there's also a really fun rogue subclass in there called the Wild Card. And
yes,
then
which looks exactly like Matt Mercer. The art for that looks exactly like Matt Mercer.
That's Twisted Fate from
It was James Hake. Lead designer and editor was James Hake. And also designers were Mackenzie de Armas, Celeste Conowich, and Todd. Oh, Todd Kenrick was on this.
Oh, cool. And there's also a very cool barb subclass called, I think it's called Path of the Depths in that.
It's like it's a weird armored one wielding what you call it, an anchor as his weapon. It's called the Path of the Depths. Yeah.
That's
and the 3 great subclasses, and like it's not officially available. They only did a limited kind of run on this. It's not officially available anymore, but if you just Google it, people have it up on Natural Crit. They had saved the PDF. I love this. Like I said, the rules in here are great. There's more parts to this that are quite interesting later. So this same subclass again, they get, so you get weapon upgrades, like minor and major weapon upgrades.
Yeah, it's
they're attachments, but they're not attachments. We're not getting full Call of Duty here.
20th
it is kind of a cool idea.
level ability, kill streaks.
Yeah. What's the one?
The tactical
Warhead
nuke.
or tactical nuke? Oh,
Yeah.
that was always the dumbest design. I hated that when I was a teenager because if you join the game and someone gets that, I'm like, oh, I guess we're all just not playing anymore then. But like, don't get me wrong, there's some bragging rights for getting a tactical nuke,
Yeah.
but also, don't you want to play the game?
Yeah.
That literally ends the match. It'd be
No.
different if it just killed everyone and you got like 10 kills from the other team or whatever. Great, now we'll all spawn back and we'll keep playing. But like, it just ends the match, and I'm like, I guess I'll go and do something else now then, or start a different game and hope someone doesn't get a fucking tactical nuke. Anyway, sorry, I'm not bitter. It's fine. It's only been 14 years. So so there is some other cool stuff. So you get your attachments. Okay, this is a complete sidebar, but I wanted to mention this because I actually really like this. There's an ability to get a 10th level called Grin and Bear It, where when you take your second wind, your AC, you get +1 to your AC, and your movement speed increases by 10 feet until the start of your next turn. I really like that. I wish that was a champion ability, because I could see a champion doing that.
That I was just about to say that is a champion ability. It's actually incredibly well translated. If I'm right, so there's like three main gun using champions from Bilgewater that this subclass is based around, and it's the one I mentioned previously, Miss Fortune, Sarah Fortune. She uses the double pistols, the very traditional.
She is literally pictured right next to this on the PDF.
Yeah, the very like traditional Pyre pistols with like the flared edges and stuff. Then there is Caitlin, who is the sniper, and all that stuff is for her. And then the third one is a guy called Malcolm Graves, who's a bank robber, and he's got a big Hextech shotgun and a cigar. And a big irony stogie at that one as well. And he kind of looks like an incredibly mean, buzz-cutted. What's your man who loves bacon? From Parks and Rec.
Oh, Ron Swanson.
Yes, Ron Swanson. He looks like an incredibly mean, buzz-cutted Ron Swanson. But one of his abilities is he does a dash forward. And while he's in combat, he has a passive called Grit, so he gains armor and magic resistance the longer he's in a fight. So like that is actually an ability he has where he like dashes forward, and like because he's in the fight he gains more armor and magic resist. So I think translating that into Grin and Bear It, where like you get additional move speed and you get +1 AC, I think that's like a beautiful translation of one game mechanic into another.
Yeah, very much so. I really like this though. Like it's not a super powerful ability or anything. I just really like this because I think it's a good ability, and I always like it when a subclass ability builds on an existing core class ability. The Open Palm Monk is great for this because obviously you have all your martial stuff anyway. But then they're like, I'm gonna punch him, but also I'm gonna knock him back or push him down or whatever, or stun him or whatever. And I'm like, I love the incorporation of subclass abilities as an addendum or as an addition to an existing ability you have. I just think it's a smart design in my mind. And this would make for a fantastic one for a champion fighter and we probably will see a redone champion fighter in the next few months.
Sorry, I'm an idiot. When you said champion, I thought you meant League of Legends character. I apologize.
No. Well, that being said, though, good example of good kind of translation of abilities from the game, you know. But I would hope I would like to see something like that on Champion Fighter when we see the remake with the 1D&D, and I imagine Champion Fighter is going to get quite a good overhaul, considering it's one of the it's probably one of the least played fighters, if not the least played fighter. Moving on anyway. So this is really cool. I love this design. I love that we get this idea of attachments. Not called attachments, they're called upgrades. It's not too Call of Duty, because I've seen fighter stuff like that and gunslinger stuff like that where it's very much like, oh, you can put on a scope and this one's like thermal and this was a silencer for your flintlock pistol, and I'm like, I don't like it being too like that personally, but this doesn't feel like that. This feels like they're very kind of good abilities that you can do. There's one that's like a bayonet almost. It's called Blade and Black Powder. There's one called Smokescreen. There's a double barrel one. But they feel like natural and they feel right for the setting, you know?
Yeah.
And it was when I was reading this, Martin, that I had my epiphany, that I had my idea. So, as you know, I've been trying to, and by the way, I don't have this done because I literally came up with it about an hour and a half ago as I was prepping for the podcast. Um, but I've been trying to come up with like a way to more incorporate firearms more into my
Mm.
own D&D world. We have the fighter gunslinger from Mercer, but I'm not a fan of that, so I've been trying to tweak that. But also, I felt like it shouldn't be the only class that uses firearms. And so I was looking at Rogue as being the other mundane, and by mundane I mean non-magical class,
Yeah.
not boring, because rogues and fighters are both awesome. Um, so I was looking at Rogue as a potential. I'm like, I could see that. You know, you're kind of a rogue. You're a criminal, so you carry a pistol on you, or maybe you're like a Han Solo type. You're a smuggler, so you have your gun at your hip. You know, all that makes perfect sense to me. So I was thinking like, okay, I want to take the gunslinger stuff, the DMG stuff, the stuff in Bilgewater, and a bunch of other stuff, and just toss them into a pile, and then start divvying them out into the two classes I'm trying to design here. And my initial thought was, right, what should each of these subclasses represent? Uh, in terms of like, how should they? What am I trying to achieve with each one? So with a fighter gun wielder, a firearms expert, what would be their thing? I'm like, well, they'd probably just be like really efficient at using it. Probably do extra damage, probably be good at range, they'd probably be very successful, they rarely miss their shot. And I'm like, yeah, that all kind of makes sense, right? So they should just be very good at using firearms. Perfect. And then I moved over to the rogue gunslinger or whatever I'm trying to make, and I was like, what should they be like? And I thought, all right, well, probably like probably like a cowboy, something that's a bit like more flourish than skill. Not that they're not skilled, just that they put a little more flair on it, a bit more style. It's the difference between someone who maybe like who get someone like maybe classically military trained who's like, I am doing this to efficiently win wars or whatever, that's my main purpose. And then the rogue variant of that is, well, I kind of learn this stuff on the streets, and I'm maybe a little bit more cocky about it, I'm a little bit more stylized.
Ooh,
And I
call the subclass the loose cannon.
Loose can I do have a name for it, but it's not as fun as that. One of the working names I was going off was Triggerman, actually, but that seems a little bit too 1920s mobsters and not quite what I'm going for.
Yeah.
But then I thought, so that made sense. But then I talked to you and I talked to Gavin, and you guys kind of pointed out to me like maybe we shouldn't not have trick shots or kind of stuff like that for like I'm saying that I feel like the rogue should have that. They should have the kind of grit points or something similar where they can do these flourishes and these trick shots, and because it seems like they would come up with all these cool flourishes, these cool moves that they've developed over years, whereas the fighter doesn't really care about that. The fighter just cares about being efficient and getting the job done. But then you guys kind of pointed out to me like, oh, well, but the fighter would probably learn some tricks in the process, and also like the rogue it gets sneak attack anyway. So they're already doing a ton of damage, and they're usually attacking from a hidden position, so they're also efficient at hitting. So really, both sides had valid reason to be each other. Both of them could have played out that role. So I kind of came to a standstill for a little while. And then I thought about it today, and I was reading over the Bilgewater thing, and I thought, well, what if the difference isn't like flourish over function? And what if instead the difference is the fighter wants to be the absolute best they can be with this weapon. They can pick up a weapon and they have trained with this weapon, and that is kind of indicative of all the fighters subclasses. I have mastered this weapon. It is the thing I use as my tool, as my instrument. That's what I work at. So I am a master of this thing. And that is kind of captured, I think, already in the existing gunslinger. Again, not future tweaks not permitted. And I thought, well, looking at all the kind of customizations and stuff that you can do in this Bilgewater one, what if the rogue class was, instead of being like a fighter like that, what if they were like someone who had their weapon adapt to them? They're not changing to master this existing weapon. They're tweaking their own custom weapon to their own kind of preferences. And I thought about a really cool concept that I think would be really fun, which is a type of rogue who is a duelist. Specifically pistol duelist. So the way I kind of visualize this is they have a gun, it's on their hip at all times, and they're willing to throw down with anybody. Anyone crosses them, talks shit, anything like that, they're like outside now in the street, and they're willing to go down to a duel immediately at a drop of a hat. And why? Because they're really, really good at it. Because if a rogue hits you with a shot like that and does all that sneak attack damage, you're dead. You are it's not a case. A fighter might hit you and do the regular weapon damage. A rogue might hit you and like kill you 4 times over with their sneak attack.
Yeah.
So like the fighter again trying to be efficient with their weapon and do their job, but this duelist, they're like, no, I'm in it for one shot and one shot only. I'm gonna go outside, load a single bullet, and when I turn around, that guy is dead. And I thought that'd be really cool. And I thought, well, if you're gonna live by the life of a duelist, if you're gonna live by that idea that this weapon's on my hip, and I'll challenge anyone who crosses me, kind of thing. What if it was a case that like you're obviously gonna make that weapon really, really personal to you? And I think that fits really well with the idea of modifying it. It could be like gold plated. It could have like gold accents and engravings and all over it. It's going to be the most stylish pistol anyone's ever seen. But that also kind of works if you want to play like an assassin or something as well.
Yeah.
You can have a rifle. And I just think that a rogue subclass, the duelist is the name I come up for it. And I mean like dueling as in like pistols at dawn style dueling.
Yeah.
Which I think captures the kind of cowboy feel of things that I kind of like. It's high noon, you're showing down, you're both standing in the middle of town, you come out, it's a quick draw, and they'd probably get something similar like a bonus to initiative and sneak attack and all that kind of stuff. So like you're gonna win in most cases if you're going 1-to-1 with someone on a drawn pistols in a shootout. It's going to be like instant, yeah, that's why I landed on that. So I think my fighter, if I'm going, and hopefully in the new year when we're done our campaign, I'll have some time to work on these. But I'm going to just tweak the existing gunslinger to fit more in the rules and kind of take away the misfires and stuff like that. And then I'm going to go with this idea for a rogue duelist, who's going to be again, one shot, which fits perfectly mechanically with a rogue because they only get one attack. Yeah, that's my idea. Rogue, duelist, single shot, customized gun where we have different attachments. Maybe they have a scope, maybe they have something else on it, but this is their gun, and they live by the life of a duelist, of someone who will win in a fight, and that fight will only last a single round.
No, I like that concept a lot, to be honest. It's very, like, yeah, I feel like this guy would always carry a pair of gloves with him, like, that kind of a way.
When I picture it, I'm picturing almost someone a bit Percy-esque, but like they're either a criminal who's wearing like a long black coat who does well for themselves, so they're not like grubby looking, they're quite stylish looking, or they're like someone from the court, they're a lord, and in order to maintain their lordly honor, if anyone insults them or their family or their house, it's outside in pistols. Because there's a great bit in Dishonored 1 where you have to go to a party to obviously that you're assassinating people as you go or whatever, and then you have to go to a house party in a huge manor in the center of town, and the first part of it is just you getting in, but I think you speak to someone outside, and you're told, hey, when you get inside, pop on them. You have a mask anyway, but it's a masquerade party, so no one's going to question that you're wearing a mask. I want you to find this guy. He might be in the gardens. He's usually outside smoking. Take this note to him and give it to him. And you don't know what the note says. And as soon as you go up to him, you hand it to him, and he goes, "Oh, he sent you to do his dirty work, did he? Right, pistols now." And you have to duel this guy. And you used to stand on these 2 stone plates, and your man is calling out all the instructions. And you're not allowed to use your own cool custom pistol that you've upgraded. He's like, we have 2 standard pistols here. Each of you take one, and you take it, and it's a regular pistol with a single shot in it. And you face away, and you hear the guy who's like mitigating the whole thing, and he's like, all right, on the count of 3, 1, 2, and you have to turn around, and you can do things like time stop, and you can like slow time, or you can like you do it, but like they get angry if you don't do the duel honorably.
Okay.
And if you do nothing, he will just shoot you and kill you stone dead. But if you turn around and get him, you can shoot a guy in the middle of the party, and the other one will go, all right, you're the victor. You can notify the person who sent you here to defend our honor. And yeah, it's a great little bit in what is 2 of my favorite games, the 2 Dishonored games. But that is one of my favorite moments. It's just arriving, and it's one of the first things you do at the party as well. It's in the garden outside. So as soon as you get inside, you just walk up to your fella. Here's a note, and the note basically says, "I've sent this man to duel you in my absence or whatever." And it's like, all right, let's go. So, and it's just one-on-one duel. Great stuff.
No, that's sick. I vaguely remember because I watched Jesse Cox play through all the Dishonored games. I vaguely remember that, but alright, yeah, that those I love the style of those games. It's very, very good.
Oh yeah, I mean I base a lot of my current D&D world, stylistically at least, off of those. I love the setting's really cool. I'm not gonna lie, I just haven't gotten around to enjoying it properly yet. But the what's it called? Is it it's the other one they had with the time loop one. The game is
Deathloop.
also Deathloop. Thank you. I literally said the word loop. Um, but I played a bit of it and it didn't quite grab me in the same way. Mostly because you're repeating a lot of the same environments over and over. Whereas Dishonored was like, here's 8 levels, but they're all super unique and everything. And it seemed a bit repetitive, and I kind of lost interest. I will go back for it, but only because Arcane Studios confirmed that this is a future within the Dishonored universe where the outsider is dead, and that's why the powers are so similar. It's because it's literally the same world, but like 100 or 200 years in the future. And I was like, oh, I don't like that. Don't get your Deathloop in my Dishonored, please.
Don't tie this failing franchise to my franchise.
Yes, I really want them to make more Dishonored. I don't like because both settings are really really stylized. Dishonored is obviously like a kind of Victorian England kind of steampunky thing going on, or whale punk I suppose you'd call it because it's all whale oil they use.
Oil punk.
Oil punk, yeah.
Diesel punk. Diesel punk is the word. That's a diesel punk word. God damn it, Martin. Yes.
But then so you have that, but obviously the magical elements of the occult and the outsider and stuff. And then this world is really stylized and that's similar powers, but it's treated slightly more scientifically. And it's also based in like a 60s or 70s kind of style with clothes and the buildings and all that kind of stuff look like they're from that time period.
Yeah.
It doesn't resonate with me as much. I really loved the setting in Dishonored. Again, I know Alana Pierce is constantly like telling people to play Deathloop because she says it's really, really good. And I'm like, I believe you, but also I don't know if I want to put the time into it right now.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. No, it's yeah. No, I'm definitely for the next world I'm making I have a Victorian style London-esque city in one of the countries, and it's very Dunlan, yes, old Dunlan. Or as they did in the Dark Souls games, where the original world was called Lordran, and then in Dark Souls 2, the place is called Drang Lake. Which is
they just changed the name and didn't say anything though?
Oh well, the whole story of the games is that it's all these different worlds all go in cycles of fire and darkness over and over again, and then even in the third one, all the stuff starts converging. So you see places from the first and second game and the third game.
Interesting.
But it was just like it's in the zero punctuation video for like Dark Souls 2, and it's like. This game we're in Drang Lake. How very original. I think nobody would notice, and I was like, yeah, actually, Jesus. But yeah, no, it's like, oh, actually, that's another really good example of like a fantasy world with guns in it too. Is Bloodborne, and in Bloodborne, they're not used actually for damage; they're your parry essentially.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so like there are some damaging guns, like you can get like a flame sprayer. There's a gun called the church cannon that's literally a big iron cannon strapped to your arm, and then like you have some cool weapons, like there's a thing called the rifle spear, where like it's like the bayonet head like attaches and comes out under, and you've got like a rifle up with like a spear handle attached to it with the big spearhead, and you can like shift it between the spear and the rifle. There's like a stake driver that's like it's basically like a big nail gun on your arm. And there's a bunch. They're all made by a certain sect of the church workshop called the Powder Kegs, who made heretical weapons for the hunters, and mainly used like stuff like gunpowder and explosives and all that kind of stuff. But they do. But generally speaking, guns in Bloodborne, like you mainly melee stuff, and then you will use your gun to like shoot someone at the very tip of like the very top of their like attack animation, and if you hit it just right, you will stun them with a parry, and you can do what's called a visceral attack then, and like do like an attack for extra damage.
So it's more to stun and interrupt the animation so that you can get an attack in. Yeah, cool.
Yeah. It's a very cool concept. But guns and fantasy, man, absolutely, let's do it.
What are you going to say about your next D&D world?
Oh, sorry, yeah, my next D&D world, very similar. I thought it was getting a little off topic, but very similar to how they have like, they have the kind of like Victorian Gothic, and but then they also have like the occult elements in it. I have this idea for like the city would be very much like there very severe like wealth inequality, like very much so like how it was in like kind of like Industrial Revolution or Victorian era London, where like there's a lot of very very rich people, but there's an ocean of extremely poor people, like literally on the poverty line. And in my head, I kind of had it for like the rich people are all kind of like very prim, proper, kind of what like almost like the equivalent of like Christians, and then like the poor people, like in the poor, like they'd be like normal people as well, but like there'd be like an undercurrent of like occultism and occult worship in like the slums and the poorer areas and stuff like that, where like people are kind of like fending for themselves, or they're more in touch with like what's called, well, I believe the technical term for it is folk magic, where it's with stuff like like pishogues. Do you ever hear of a pishogue?
Yeah, I think you've mentioned it to me before, actually.
Yeah, a pishogue is like in old Irish culture, it was like a curse. Like someone might leave like rotting. They might like go to a part of your property and like leave rotting meat hidden under a bush there, and that'll supposedly like sicken your animals and cause them to die and that kind of stuff. And it's also like you also hear like someone can describe something as pishogery, which basically means it's bollocks.
Right.
You can say bollocks on YouTube. Hey. But like it's that kind of stuff, and like folk magic, and like I really want to do something like that where it's like, yeah, like there's like a wealth inequality, but also there's like elements of like religion versus occultism versus folk magic and all that kind of stuff.
You definitely need to. You don't have to play him if you don't want to, but Dishonored has that like in spades.
Oh yeah. No, like I said, I've watched the Jesse Cox playthrough, like the Witch. You're on about the Witches expansion, right?
Well, that is part of it, but like we'll say the occult stuff with the Outsider himself. The Outsider it lives in the void, and is this occult, like ancient god who was made. He was like a young man who was sacrificed, and like there was like, this is going back like hundreds, if not thousands of years, and this is the same culture that is here now, but they weren't they're obviously a precursor to them. They take this young man. They stab him in the chest with a knife because they were trying to like awaken a god or trying to tap into the void, and they accidentally made him a god.
Oh. Okay.
And that's why the Outsider appears human, but and he has the same appearance all the time because he was a mortal man at one point, and this cultists made him into who he is. And there's other people who pray to him and worship him and stuff, and you'll find if you're going through apartments and stuff as you're sneaking around, you'll come across people's diaries or little shrines they've set up to the Outsider and stuff like that. And there's also the actual church, which is the Abbey of the Everyman. And they have like militant enforcers that wear masks. And they're not the police, but they fucking act like them.
Yeah.
And they come around and they hate the occult, and they'll kick in doors, and if they suspect anyone of dealing with the Outsider, they'll come for you like. Very, very interesting. They also have a lot of anti-magic stuff. They have these sound generators that prevent you from using your powers. But yeah, all that stuff is very, very Dishonored. So like, delve into some lore videos or something if you can. I'm sure you'll find some really good inspiration there. Yeah,
no, I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to like kind of getting more into the writing of that maybe over Christmas.
But Martin.
Yes, Connor.
That's all the time we have for today.
With a bullet. Hey. Sorry, that wasn't funny. But yeah, no. This is a really fun episode. It like I knew we'd have a lot to talk about with like guns and firearms, because some people actually get like really, really like angry at the idea of putting guns in D&D and stuff. It's the same kind of people who are like, why is the monk in D&D? But like I'm just like, it's just another element of fantasy, and it does fit in. Like as long as you do the work to make it fit in, it fits in. Like, you know.
Yeah, exactly. And like at the end of the day, like I think just make your setting whatever is comfortable to you. Don't worry if other people are doing it. You don't have to use materials that are out there. You can choose. You can opt out of them. But also at the same time, if a player wants to play something and you're the dungeon master, do what you can to accommodate them. You know, people, you're there to try and help people fulfill their fantasies of being a badass character, killing monsters. So, you know, do what you can in that front.
Yeah.
If you have any questions you'd like us to ask, stories you'd like us to share, or topics you would like us to cover, please tweet us at MicFlayersPod on Twitter. You can find our podcast on YouTube, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Anchor Breaker, and Radio Republic. Martin, where can people find you on the internet?
If you're looking for me on the internet, you can find me on Twitter at So Sorry It's Over, and also on the Micflayers podcast Twitter account at MicFlayersPod. Connor, if those folks want to find you on the internet, where can they find you?
You can find me on Twitter at 0.Conor, ZeroPointConor, 1N, very important. Or, as always, every Friday at 6 p.m. Irish time here on the Micflayers podcast on all the aforementioned platforms. Guys, thank you so much for joining us. I hope you learned a little bit today. I hope you too will also include these various subclasses and rules and stuff in your D&D game. Adding more can only make D&D better. So guys, thank you so much for watching. We'll see you all next time on the Micflayers podcast.
Later,
see you
folks.
later.